All right, we are joined now by our guest, Hamit Dardagan, who was a minority rights activist and researcher who co-founded Iraq Body Count with John Sloboda in 2003. That then became the largest public database of modern war. They have kept that partnership alive ever since. And after October 7th, they have begun to use their knowledge and some of the things that they learned during that time over those 2 decades. They're applying that to the genocide in Gaza, which is some difficult work, as I'm sure you can all imagine. They recently released a new report examining the casualty records coming out of the Gaza Ministry of Health, which also takes a look at the inherent difficulties that come with such a task and the way that any error, mistake, or miscalculation is immediately used to try to discredit or call into question the validity of all of those reports. So Hamit, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time. Let me bring you in here. Okay, so first of all, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
The work that you've done in Iraq for the Iraq Body Count was obviously incredibly difficult. I know that that's something that you worked with WikiLeaks on, and it was a really difficult task, but it did teach you quite a bit about these casualty reports and how important they are. So I'm going to bring in, I have a couple of slides here from some of the reports that you've done. This is from the one that you released on April 18th, Gaza's internal list of the killed, a genocide's actual progress revealed. And everybody, you can go to Substack and follow IBC there. They have tons of reporting there that you can check out, and please subscribe if you are able to do so. But the reason why I wanted to talk to you is because I feel like there's such a huge attempt currently, and has been since October 7th, to discredit the Ministry of Health and the reporting. If there's any slight miscalculation, if there's any minor misinformation, or a name is wrong here or there, or even, as we're going to discuss, a gender is misreported, people are trying to discredit that. So can you talk just broadly about what's coming out of Gaza and why there is such an inherent difficulty there?
Well, I mean, in some ways, it's miraculous that they're able to do this kind of recording at all with the attacks on the hospitals and so on. We expected kind of the worst. And quite early on, we noticed that the reports that they were issuing were having some errors in that you could just see. You could see typos, you could see things that were formatted wrong. You had several names in the field for one person. So we were quite concerned ourselves in a different way from these critics. These critics are looking for errors to try and some kind of fraud. We were actually concerned that in the circumstances that they were facing after the initial report, which was released in October 2023, the reports after that or immediately after that were completely degraded by comparison. And the Ministry of Health actually did issue a statement saying, we can't do the kind of reporting we need to do right now. We have difficulties. We're not reporting from certain areas and so on. And our concern was simply that there would be, between these reports, there'd be some deaths that were reported in one report, an earlier report, and just not making it into later reports for whatever reason. So we were also concerned about errors, but not for the same kind of trying to catch people out, but trying to see, how these reports could maybe be merged and so on, so that deaths that were reported in one would still be carried over to later reports, even if they seemed to be missing. And it was really unclear what was going on. But what we've discovered since then, actually, is the amount of backfilling, for want of a better word, that the ministry has been doing, which is that they've been going back over time, going back all the way back to October 2023, the first report. And if you see their latest reports now, they've actually increased the number for that period. So at that time, a lot of people saying, what about people buried under rubble, people haven't been reported, and so on. Well, they didn't just stand still and just leave that be. They've actually gone back and filled in a lot of stuff. So in the report that you showed initially a screenshot of, there's something like 22,000 deaths that have been added for earlier periods. That's not the deaths that have come since then. That's just deaths that were previously not reported in the earlier reports. So, I mean, that to me is like almost like a miraculous level of diligence and hard work by these people. And every single report, there's been 8 or 9, depending how you count them, reports since the beginning. After that initial drop in quality, they started to improve. I don't know exactly whose decision it was, or what. I guess they learned how to deal with reporting in a new environment, because they started to use reports from families and so on, and insert those into their own reports. Initially, not very carefully. They just put everything in that they could, just to make sure that people were covered rather than not covered. But I think since at least June 2024, every single report has become higher quality, more detailed, with more information, less errors. You get fuller names instead of just part of a name. And of course, people have used those things as excuse to say, oh, well, this person's gone missing. They haven't gone missing. They are in the later reports, but now you have all 4 parts of their full family official name, whereas before only maybe their first and the last name, or even a nickname was in the reports. So actually, it's as from the work that we've seen, no other country, no other government has been as transparent as actually the Gaza Ministry of Health has been in what they've reported. And we focus solely on them. We haven't looked at the Gaza Information Office and so on. We've stuck to the Ministry of Health because they are the primary people doing this work.
Yeah. And prior to this, what I think is so interesting in reporting, Western press would praise the Ministry of Health for how accurate they were in their reporting up until October 7th. It was suddenly after October 7th that the Western media wanted to start calling into question the work that they were putting in, which, obviously that's very politically motivated. But you mentioned how they've updated the reports. I now have this chart from that your earlier report up on the screen. And so people can kind of get a visual of how these numbers have been updated. And it really, it's common sense that when something like October 7th happens, and then the fallout from that, Gaza was under intense attack. And so the idea of trying to keep up with keeping track of all of those casualties, as you mentioned, people being buried under rubble, people being missing for some time because they couldn't find people for a while, that is just common sense. And so that's why I wanted to speak to you, because it's very frustrating to me to see that narrative being pushed, that these are false reports and that they're being trumped up to, make people emotionally invested in the casualties and all of this stuff. It's absurd on every level. So, this chart here where it shows the updating, I can't imagine the Ministry of Health and what they're up against.
As we said in one of the reports, there's no shortage of casualties.
No.
They don't have to invent anything at all. And it's also, a lot of it is also backed up by journalistic reporting, like horrific pictures and so on. The thing about the reports that they release, though, is that they're releasing the names of people, they're giving you their age, they're giving you their gender, and so on, which is like a basic identification of the people involved. But what's also been happening at the same time, and which we've also been collecting, and particularly my colleague John has been doing on a daily basis, is collecting memorials from around the web, most particularly on X, where you see the same people quite often, same people that are also in these lists, but you find out where you see a photograph of them, you find out what their profession was. Often there's like a little memorial to them, a little bit about what their dreams were. They were hoping to become, a football player, or they were hoping to become a dentist and working at, all kinds of things that actually humanize the individuals involved. And to me personally, it's important that we actually memorialize and remember the people as those who loved and knew them, wanted them remembered. That's who these pictures are coming from. These are coming from family members and friends of the people who were killed. They are their pictures, their memories of these people. Unfortunately, what we're also seeing, and which is not their making, not how I believe these people want their loved ones remembered, which is, as flesh, just torn bits of bodies and so on, completely dehumanized. Those are Israel's images of those people. They're the ones created by Israel's attacks. What we're seeing is how these people were in life, how they look forward to life, and especially we did a video that by the standards of our small channel went kind of viral. which showed children who'd been killed. And, you just see all these shining faces, basically children, babies, teenagers, full of all this sort of hope that children have in their expressions.
Yeah. And that I think is what is so difficult for most people watching this, is that everybody knows that over half of the population in Gaza are under the age of 18. They're kids, they're children. And so of course they're the most impacted. And of course we're going to see those pictures and those faces. And it's really unbearable at this point. I mean, obviously I speak from a position of great privilege from my house in Ohio, quite safe. But it is unbearable to watch, as you mentioned. I wanted to ask you, and I'm glad that you brought this up, because obviously when you were doing the Iraq War, it was a little bit different. Social media wasn't as prevalent. How has social media impacted your ability to do this work? Because I think, and I've spoken about this many times, I think that the reason why we're seeing such a shift in public consciousness on this issue is because of social media, because people are being bombarded with the images, as you spoke about, every single day, and they can't escape it. And it's a genocide literally being live streamed to us every day. So, I mean, social media has to also impact the way that you're able to do this work. So speak about that a little bit.
Well, in other conflicts, including in Iraq, there's family members still want to memorialize their dead. Cemeteries often, they're not just like gravestones, they have like little panels with glass paneled photos where they actually have memorials of each person killed and so on. Or in other wars, you've had people have like poster wars in Libya, for example. After the NATO attacks on that, there were walls with people's pictures that, to just put up pictures of their loved ones who'd been killed. And now this is the equivalent of that. We have the equivalent of people actually, people who are affected by all this, being able to remind the world of who it is that they have lost and that the whole world has actually lost. With social media, we have, at the moment anyway, we have this additional thing of the images of, I think generally not coming from relatives, of people who've been torn to pieces as well, which has a galvanizing effect on people. But I don't know. I don't know how long-lived that can be. I mean, after a while, it's just, people either become numb, get actually used to seeing just things. I mean, I've seen things, I'm sure you have too, that I just never thought I could ever see it visually. When they have like a disaster movie, like a 2012, I think one of them was called. It's like, it's like the world ends and there's a huge apocalypse of some kind. And you see buildings falling on people, and you see like people like almost like little ants, being crushed by buildings collapsing and so on. If you watch it, you'll see there's never any children. You never see a building falling, in these entertainments. You never see a building collapsing and crushing children. That's just beyond what is allowable as entertainment. Now we've been seeing that stuff as reality in ways, again, that no sort of Hollywood special effects makeup artist could have ever dreamed of doing, and so on. So that's had a powerful effect as well. But I don't know what the long-term effect of that is going to be. It galvanizes people to act, but I'm not sure it galvanizes everybody. And I think there are people who are also just not willing to look at that. On the other hand, I think you can get more people to look at pictures of the children who were killed when they were still happy children. Some of the children in that video, there are other images of them that we obviously didn't use, which are just horrific, because those same children that you see smiling and happy in life were horribly killed. And I think in a way, we're trying to also respect the wishes of the people who knew and loved them, who want their loved ones remembered as they were and not as the sort of torn apart pieces of meat that they were transformed into by bombing and all the rest of it.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, as I said, unbearable. And I think that you're right. I think that we're already seeing people starting to become desensitized to it, which is insane to think about that anybody could be desensitized to such horrific images and footage. I mean, and it's really because we are being bombarded by it. And maybe that's a little bit of an intentional thing, just pummeling people with it so that we just become used to it.
It's dehumanizing. I mean, they just don't look like human beings. Many of them just don't look like human beings. It's like something it's in a butcher shop or so. It's just not human anymore. And of course, it's like as it should be. It's revolting. But again, I don't know if, as you say, people are getting desensitized, and it may well be that longer term that may not be the best strategy from an advocacy point of view. I don't really know. So, I mean, the thing is, everything's happening, and that could possibly happen. That's the worst stuff that we've ever seen, and there's nothing being done to stop it by the people who have the power to stop it. I mean, you and I would stop it tomorrow, of course, but
yeah, and that's, I mean, it's a very frustrating thing. I do think that it has snapped some people out of it, though. I think people recognize that we just do. Our elected officials, really the world over, do not care what we think. I mean, they don't work for us. And so I think that a lot of people have really had to come to terms with that. And I think a lot of people, too, this has really made people who weren't asking questions before. Once you ask a single question, I think it kind of leads to an avalanche. And once that door opens, you start to question a lot of things. And so I think we're seeing that. I don't know, as you said, I don't know where that goes. I don't know if it's going to be something that it's fast enough to save the people of Palestine. I don't know if it's going to be enough to end this and to save Gaza and to save the West Bank. I don't know. I hope it is. But it is, I do think that we are starting, we definitely have seen a shift in consciousness. There's no question about it. Prior to October 7th and everything that's happened after, Israel had a stranglehold on the narrative. They had a stranglehold over the support. Nobody really ever questioned. I mean, some of us did, but the vast majority of people didn't even question, didn't think about it. And now a lot of people who had never even given this much thought have really started to question what's going on there. And I think that that's good. I'm just not sure it's going to be enough. So,
there's also the impunity question. I mean, Iraq also politicized a lot of people. People realized what the world is really like, what the US empire means, what the UK's role in it here in this country, and so on. But everyone's got away scot-free. Everyone who is responsible, there's been complete impunity. So I think if there's something to be learned from this, that if there's impunity again, it's definitely going to happen again. Who knows over what, but it just means that they can kill people en masse and then just kind of go
and then walk away. And that is it makes me so angry that not a single person, well, that's not true. The whistleblower who exposed the war crimes and the journalist who published them, those two people went to prison. Not a single person who carried out or called for a war crime ever even saw the inside of a courtroom. And that is mind-blowing to me, but that's the society we live in, right? I mean, that's where we're at. And so that's a great point. Actually, we have to really push on that, and there has to be accountability. There has to be. If not, this will happen again. This will absolutely.
And that's why documentation is so important. The kind of documentation that the Gaza Ministry of Health is doing, even the documentation that's involved in people putting out memorials and just keeping those people in people's, those victims in people's mind's eye. And I think that is just essential to this, because, people kind of forgotten about Iraq. It's like, it happened long ago. We had this disgraceful politician who became, what was his name? Anyway, he was a politician who then later became a head of a large NGO in the US, just saying, it's time to move on. Oh yeah. Move on from why? It's easy for you to move on. What about the people who've left, been left disabled, in Palestine or in Gaza right now? One of the things that we could show early on in just analyzing the information that the ministry had put out is that the number of people who are injured to the number of people who are killed is very low. That's to say, with the kind of bombing that's happening, normally what you get is a lot of injuries. There was a terrorist attack in the UK called 7/7 after kind of 9/11, 2007 in July. And I think there were, about 50 people killed. Around 50 people were killed by that. And it was in the underground train. And there were 700 people eventually wounded. 350 the first day, and then 700 people who were wounded because you had people who were not very badly wounded, but self-admitting later and so on. So 2 days later, it went from 350 to 700 people who had been wounded or injured to some degree by that bombing. And normally in war, it's something like 3 to 4 times, but it depends on how people are being killed. If people are being killed by snipers, they're usually just killed outright.
Yeah.
But if it's explosives in urban areas and so on, then you get a much higher number of people wounded as well. But in Gaza, actually, the number of people wounded, first of all, children are more likely to die from their wounds. There's smaller bodies, like just more of them is just destroyed. And also just the lack of medical facility to look after people. No, I mean, no already just the fact that there's no anesthetics is already horrifying enough.
Yeah, I can't even wrap my head around that. I really cannot wrap my amputations taking place without anesthesia is it's beyond my ability to comprehend. But it doesn't help either when they're bombing hospitals, literally. I mean, they're literally bombing hospitals. They just did so. Oh, was it yesterday or the day before? Yesterday?
Yes, to kill one man. Yes. To target one man. And also, you mentioned amputations. It's bad enough when an adult loses a limb and, that's it. But if you're growing and you lose a limb, it's a different story altogether. And often you have to have continuous operations as you grow and your body doesn't grow in a normal way. So, I mean, the horrors in Gaza are just unbelievable. In Iraq, roughly 8 to 10% of the civilian victims were children, which we classify as people 17 years old and younger. In Gaza is 3 times that. That percentage is 3 times or more. Now, Iraq's a horrible war. No one can tell me any. Obviously,
sure.
No one studied the war more closely than I and my colleagues have. And they're more horrified by it and have put more into it and read everything there is to read about all the horrors of that war. But what's happening in Gaza is truly worse. So far, it's not at the same scale yet, but it's to get there. And in terms of children killed, it may already have surpassed that.
Yeah.
So just because of the sheer percentage of proportion of children being killed, and that bespeaks just one thing: it's not a war. There's no targeting of military. I mean, in Iraq, it's still a heck of a lot of children to be killed, but more or less, just generally, it was collateral damage. There were very few reports of children being deliberate. A few, but very few of children being killed in deliberate gunfire and so on. There's just very little of that.
Yeah.
Proportionally speaking, of course, it's terrible for whoever it happened to.
For sure.
In Gaza, it's huge. In Gaza, it's just children, women,
it's overwhelming.
Men.
It is overwhelming to even consider. And I mean, I'm a mother, and I can't help but imagine my own kids in that situation, and it just makes my blood boil. It's almost, I can't even contain my rage. It makes me very angry. And to know that children are being most heavily impacted, and to know the devastation. I mean, not only do you have the kids who are, first of all, who were killed, which is obviously worst case scenario, but as you mentioned, kids who are losing limbs. You have kids who have lost in their entire families and are now orphaned. You have kids who, I mean, we haven't even touched on the psychological damage that this is inevitably going to cause. And so there's so many direct and indirect things that are they're going to be dealing with this really for generations, and it's just it really is overwhelming. I wanted to also talk about the latest report that you put out, and this is the tweet that you put out. Everybody go to @IraqBodyCount and follow on Twitter, support also on Substack as well. But this one I think is really touches on what we were discussing earlier about the attempts to discredit the reporting coming out of the Ministry of Health. And I think that that's really important because they're looking for any reason to, kind of stick a thumb in the eye of the reporting coming out of here and to try to make it look as if it's not credible. Clearly it is. And as you mentioned, the Ministry of Health has really been transparent, including with their mistakes. There's obviously going to be mistakes made when you're dealing with this type of a situation, when there are as many casualties as there are, when it's difficult. I mean, the Ministry of Health itself is under attack. So trying to collect information and make sure that it's credible and valid and all of that stuff has got to be just an incredible task. So talk a little bit about this report and what you see that they're dealing with in terms of, trying to figure it all out and making those, correcting those errors as they go.
So when we were looking at their mistakes, which are there, we also saw that they were improving things the whole time. And just, when they made a mistake on gender, a few reports later, it was corrected, But the gender one is kind of interesting because if you can, I don't know if you can you go down a bit to that graph? If not, it doesn't matter.
I think I might, I'm not sure if I have the right
the
graph that you're...
the small dots.
Yes, I have that one. Let me pull that up for you. There you go.
That's it. Oh, great. Perfect. So, allegedly, the Ministry of Health was converting male deaths into female deaths in order to evoke greater sympathy, because we're supposed to care about women and not care about men for some reason.
Right.
And even though men, men actually do die in higher numbers because they take more risks. They're more involved in sort of first responder activity. They make sure to be the one that goes shopping and does the dangerous stuff in times of war. It's completely normal. These are civilian men and men who basically are brave, and who are not going to let their children or their daughters or their wives be the ones to go out and take those risks for the family. It's kind of what you expect men to do in most societies. Anyway, so apparently the Ministry of Health was changing some men into women deliberately to make us feel worse, to make us feel bad about what's going on. And what that graph shows is the scale of that change. So in all that graph, all those people represent 103 individuals. Each dot is 103 individuals because they claimed that 103 men had been converted to women in their statistics. So each dot is 100, equivalent to 103. And as you can see, there's just one white dot. That white dot is the sum total change that the Ministry of Health is supposed to have made deliberately. But it doesn't just end there, because at the same time, because they were actually mistakes, which we also saw long before, there were also mistakes made in the other direction, because they're mistakes. They're not nothing deliberate going on. And you could see that, and as it turns out, in most of the time, they made more mistakes in converting women to men than the other way around. Now, this is such a desperate, even if it were true, it would be just like such a crazy thing to do. Here you have, in this particular graphic represents, I think it was 34,000 people killed. And so you change the 103 over, and that's going to like change what the United Nations and the Security Council do. I mean, it's just so crazy. And it just shows you just how, in a way, it's not just desperate, it's like shameless propaganda. It's like, you can say any old crap and people will just believe it and repeat it. So that was just one instance. They also did some other things, which was when the ministry corrects stuff, I mean, they could have just left stuff in there uncorrected. But what they did was, when they discovered that something was not legitimately belonging in the list, they would take them out. Remove them from the list, put them through a process of verification. And that's another thing that we could show, that just about almost everything that's ever been taken out has been put into a queue for verification. There were a few natural deaths, what they call natural deaths. I mean, it's kind of arguable whether someone who doesn't get their cancer treatment is dying a natural death when it's due to the war, that they're not getting their treatment. But anyway, they don't include those. I mean, I was speaking to the guy at the ministry after having just read a story about some babies dying of hypothermia due to, I think it was probably due to lack of power in that hospital. So a few babies died overnight. And I said, oh, I haven't seen them in your thing. I said, we don't do that. We don't include people who die of hypothermia, who die of anything other than direct violence. So these figures that we're seeing from them are really limited to violent deaths, direct violent deaths. Now, in Iraq, the number of people, or the proportion of people dying due to lack of access to medical care or because the medical system was impacted by the war, was relatively small. It was fairly small. All the surveys that actually included those kinds of indirect effects showed a relatively small proportion of people dying due to that. Because in Iraq, the hospitals didn't come under direct attack. I mean, yeah, certainly the country was affected economically and in all kinds of ways by the occupation, invasion and occupation, but not nearly like what's happening in Gaza. There were no direct attacks on hospitals. I think there was just one case of a hospital being damaged by a bomb that exploded outside the hospital and was clearly aiming. The very few things like that. And I don't excuse any aspect of the Iraq war, believe me, but that just didn't go on. That just didn't happen. And in Gaza, it's become normalized. You'll remember that there was a bombing in a hospital, and there were all these claims by the media and other outlets saying that Israel would never bomb a hospital.
Right.
And it was like a bomb it was like a rocket falling back down to and since then it's just become completely normal that they just do it in a routine way, as if like a hospital, and their general excuse, of course, is that they're being used as a Hamas control center. Yeah, they come up with these fancy terms as if like Hamas was like some sort of James Bond villains or something, and it's just well, the thing is, it's never really credible as in and of itself. But even when it's true, I mean, this whole concept of human shields, just because someone is using a human shield, I mean, let's say, somebody holds up a baby in front of them when they're about to be shot. You can't just go, well, I'm going to shoot you right through the baby. That's okay. No. It's not okay. In any understanding of international humanitarian law, the laws of war, it's not okay. Yeah, the person that held the baby up in front of them, yeah, they're guilty too. But so's the person who still took the shot and still fired at them. So that doesn't wash. So, I mean, so many things so many things have become normalized as a result of what's been going on in Gaza that is just beggars.
It's terrifying. Yeah. It's terrifying because so many, international law has been completely thrown to the wayside. It doesn't exist anymore. Not that I'm sure that it ever did, but it's certainly at this point, it's gone. Like there is the idea that we've allowed Israel to get away with the things that they have, and the way that they've done it in, manufacturing these stories, like the 40 beheaded babies early on, that was kind of, a way to justify the genocide and the kicking off of everything. And then it's just been one lie after another. And as you mentioned, there was I think it was the Al-Awahi hospital. They're like, oh, that was a misdirected Hamas missile or something. And then it turns out that it wasn't. And all of these things just keep getting debunked. And they were just aghast that anybody would ever imply that Israel would bomb a hospital. And now we're like 30 hospitals in, and they just keep bombing hospitals. So, I mean, it blows my mind, but it is.
How could anyone ever believe that there were 40 beheaded babies anyway? Right? I mean, even the worst terrorist organization you ever heard of never ever did anything like that.
No.
So why should we all just automatically believe it? And since people did promulgate that story all through their media for months on end, and some people still repeat this stuff, no one sort of turned around and said, hey, we were like really dumb. That was really a big mistake. We should go. No, there's no soul searching and so on going on.
No,
And
the president of the United States went on television and claimed to have seen the videos and the pictures of that. He went on national television in the United States of America, Joe Biden, and lied and told people that he had seen evidence for that. And there was never any accounting for that. He was never held accountable for that lie. And that is what I mean. The just audacity of that is just fascinating to me. I mean, it's terrifying and it's evil, but the audacity of it is just insane. And you know, and as soon as I heard it, I knew it was garbage, but as soon as I heard it, my instant thought was incubator babies. This sounds an awful lot like incubator babies. And they just regurgitate the same sort of narratives over and over again, just like we heard in Ukraine that soldiers were being fed what's it called? The erectile dysfunction. I'm blanking on. Yes, thank you. You guys already used that lie. We're going to do that again? Really? And they just keep replaying the same nonsense.
Stuff.
It's
Which
embarrassing.
Has been going on since, you know, at least before the First World War. You know, you had all these horrific images of, you know, the Hun. And, you know, it's the thing is, like, who are these smart people who get taken in by this stuff?
I know.
They're not being taken in. They're just carrying out their functions as propagandists. That's all that's really happening. And, you know, sometimes, I mean, I'm quite old now, and I've seen quite a few wars and seen how the media kind of flips. Like, people that you were just used to seeing as like your normal sort of news anchors, or as I like to call them, news actors. These people, you know, they seem fine. And then suddenly there's like a war on, and then you realize, oh, wow, I didn't know this person at all. Because suddenly
the mask suddenly comes off, right?
That's
also fascinating. But yes, okay. So again, just thank you so much for coming on to talk about this. I would love to have you back, as unfortunately this is going to continue. So I would love to have you back to talk about this further, get more in depth with it. So everybody go to @IraqBodyCount on Twitter. You can follow them there. You can also go to their Substack if you want to keep up on this reporting. It's hugely important. Also, please share the work. The more people that get factual information, the better off we are. And we really need to humanize the victims of this genocide, and really need to put names and faces. These are not just, images that you see on screen, buried under rubble and all of the horrible things that we've seen. They're people. They had dreams and goals and plans and all of that stuff. So we need to humanize them and make sure we're keeping, them, their names and their faces as they were when they were alive, out in the public eye. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And again, I would love to have you back anytime.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Bye.
Please clap.